Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show where we treat the final edit of the movie like the script. I'm one of your hosts, Bob Rose, at Thundergrunt Bob on all social media, and right now, Jimmy's going to introduce himself.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant, and by the way, my Twitter handle is at JimmyRGeorge.
And now, Jamie.
I'm Jamie Nash, and I am a screenwriter, and I wrote a book called Save the Cat Writes for TV, and another book called the Save the Cat Beat Sheet Workbook, which are now available at Amazon. Go buy them right now.
And today, we're going to talk about one of the premier Oscar contenders, The Holdovers, by Alexander Payne. But before we get into our talking points, we're going to go around and we're going to say our own personal reaction to this movie. Whatever we want to say. So let's start with Jamie.
I liked it.
All right, Jimmy.
All right, that's it.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Yeah. It's good writing. I don't have a ton really to say about it. It was kind of a joke, but also kind of serious. I liked it. I mean, it was a movie like we don't get too often anymore, which I appreciate. I love there's some elements of it, like I love the look and the design of it and stuff like that. I think it's great. I think Paul Giamatti's great. I think it was a fun watch. It's weird. I don't think it's like as good as some movies I'd compare it to, like Sideways, or Election or Dead Poets Society or something like that or whatever. But I think it's really good and probably in my top 5 for the year.
Nice. Jimmy?
Yeah, I went into this completely blind, which I think in this day and age is hard to do. Like, I didn't know anything about it. And I was really glad because nothing was spoiled, and I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. Like, the performances are fantastic. Of course, like Jamie said, the 70s ambiance. I love that. I think the script is really fucking great. And we're another one of these things where we're not even going to get to scratch the surface of all the craft on display. But I think it's deserved of its nomination for best screenplay, and I'm excited to talk about all that stuff.
A potential winner for, like we were talking about before. I think it's got a good shot at winning the best screenplay.
Original screenplay.
Yeah, and by the way, the script is out there. We're gonna reference it, like the actual written word, the visible ink. And for anyone out there who's just trying to learn, I think it's a great teaching script. It reads, it's very lean. There's tons of white space. There's bolded scene headings, Jamie.
I like bolded. I do too. I do bolded scene headings.
So. I do too. It's it's one of the many things that people argue over. But yeah, it's a great read. That he does the things where he cheats with the unfilmables in a way that it's still technically filmable and things like that.
I do that too.
I do that too. So it's just a great script. So yeah.
Once again, I feel like this is like last episode, the segment of the show where you guys are supposed to say other stuff and talk about the script. I'm going to use mine. I mean, obviously, I want to say I'm a lifelong Paul Giamatti fan, obviously. Huge fan. I almost feel like this role is like everything his career has kind of been working towards. Not that he doesn't have a lot more in him, but it kind of feels like one of those roles is like, I'm rooting for the guy. But one thing I wanted to say about Paul Giamatti is that with the Holdovers press tour, he's done a lot of like interviews and stuff recently and like career retrospective videos, especially with GQ and Vanity Fair and a few other podcasts, and every time one of these people interview him, they always skip over Shoot 'Em Up. And I just want to say, I love Shoot 'Em Up. It's one of Paul Giamatti's best performances, and everyone should watch it. And those publications should stop ignoring it. Because Paul Giamatti, if you ever watch him in any of his interviews, he always loves talking about his lesser loved movies. He's happy to talk about Big Fat Liar, Private Parts, Big Mama's House, he views all of it as equal footing acting. He does not like want to forget about the stuff that he's done.
I listened to a podcast. He did Mark Maron's podcast, and I thought it was great.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that yet.
It was one of my favorite Marons in a long time. Like I thought it was
Awesome.
great. However, on that one, I can't remember the exact words because it's been a couple months since I listened, but he basically said he did not understand Big Fat Liar at all. And he still doesn't understand it, but people like it for some reason. Like he was very confused because he was like, I think Maron asked him, "Is there any movie you really didn't like, or you did?" He said, "There's this one kids movie I made, Big Fat Liar. I have no idea what it was about, or something like that. I still don't."
If you watch the GQ video, he talks about like how they just let him go nuts in that, and the whole thing about him getting painted blue.
Yeah.
but he doesn't seem vindictive about.
No, he was more like casting himself as the fool in that one. Like he even
had an interviewer say, "You probably don't want to talk about private parts," and Paul Giamatti goes, "No, are you kidding? That was like a total tour de force of acting. Like he like defended private parts, and his role as Pig Vomit, like totally." So I don't know. Like I love this movie and everything, but Paul Giamatti is one of those actors who's done literally everything, and it annoys me when you see people like forget or want to push away like comedy action stuff. I don't know why that always annoys me, but I'm using my little tiny platform here to say
I do have a bone to pick with him about those like telephone commercials. Like, what the heck?
Well, okay, that's fine.
What are you doing?
I forgot about that.
He's got to eat. He's got to eat.
Well, my friend Chris once said that for those commercials, he kept the hat from the John Adams, so he already had the hat.
You're right. Yeah,
I always thought that was perfect because he does. It's just the same hat from John Adams.
Also, what year were those? He wasn't like maybe making top money.
No, I think it was in the last 3 years he's been doing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think they're recent. I think he's had a long ongoing. I think they basically dumped a truck of money in his front porch for him. I mean, he probably got like, $10 million to do these commercials or something, and it was
good for him.
Better.
He also has a podcast. Paul Giamatti has a podcast called Chinwag.
I did not know that.
He has his own podcast, and it's been going on since I think 2020.
So. My friend Bradley, he did a
phone call.
His show. Yeah, I wonder who that is. He did a show. I'm trying to hear. He did a show called Lodge 49, and Giamatti actually was the producer of it.
He was in it too, right? Didn't he? Wasn't he in it? He talks about it in one of those videos, and he says it was just a surreal show.
He was in the last season of it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you for letting me talk about Paul Giamatti. Last time I talked about what's his name? The other actor,
David Krumholtz.
Krumholtz, right? So I'm gonna use my segment sometimes for I want to use it for anything about the movie. But yeah, he's so great in this movie. I'm kind of hoping he wins Best Actor, but I don't think it's possible. I think Oppenheimer is gonna steamroll that. But what does the Oscar know anyway? Jamie, who wrote this shit?
Yes, the writer of this was David Hemmingson. And David Hemmingson is mostly a sitcom guy. If you look at his IMDb, it says writer known for Whiskey Cavalier, which was, I guess that wasn't a sitcom. That was kind of an action comedy show. I watched a couple episodes of that. Kitchen Confidential, isn't that a reality show?
It sounds like a reality show. If it's not.
Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 and Just Shoot Me. So that kind of gives you the feel for who he is. And apparently this script started as a TV pilot. Like he was trying to write, I read a little bit of his backstory. Like he started as a lawyer. He made the jump to writing, and he has a ton of credits, like Family Guy, American Dad, How I Met Your Mother, Lie to Me, all these different shows. Like just a working guy who probably has 200 television episodes under his belt or something from all different shows. And apparently he was a lawyer. He made the jump to writing, and, he's been working hard ever since. But this particular script started as a pilot, and it was more going to be kind of it was kind of his shift. Like, I'm writing all these kind of work for hire, and all these other shows. I'm going to write something personal. I'm going to write something about my past. He went to a boarding school. He actually, I think he had a parent split up situation. There was something going on with that. And his pilot was actually what I think I read about it was that it was about a kid that went to a boarding school. I think it said his father taught at the boarding school. So it's kind of like a father-son kind of story set at the boarding school is what happened. And again, it was a pilot, so it was a TV show that would happen over many, many episodes. And then, Jimmy, you can fill in a little bit of this. But then Alexander Payne kind of called him up out of the blue and had read the pilot and kind of pitched him on a feature that wasn't quite the pilot. It was kind of like a new idea, but also set in a boarding school as well.
Yeah, and it was also, the pilot was in the 80s, and Alexander Payne pitched to move it to right at the, during the Vietnam era, and so he said that Alexander Payne gave him this log line to build the new version out of. And it is: an ocularly challenged prep school professor is punished into holding over with a group of students, one of whom has been abandoned by his mother for her honeymoon. And he said, that's all he gave me. And he said it was really great, a really great collaborative process. As he said, so he started to build the story and the characters. He said he started to write short stories with all the different characters, and then as they got more developed, he'd start pitching to Alexander about where the direction of it was going. But yeah.
And the one the one thing I wanted to mention, because it kind of is brought up here, so him writing a pilot for a TV show, the one thing I really like about this pilot he decided to write, and I'm sure he's written many pilots over time just with his long career, but the one thing I always advise, like in my book, I always say pilots in particular, like even more than features, really need to be personal. The way I put it is they have to be kitchen confidential. You on a plate. They really have to say something about you. There has to be something personal in it. Now, my advice is more because pilots are even more so writing samples than features are. So when you're writing, it's less like you're trying to pitch some high concept and you're really pitching yourself. So you have to pitch yourself as a good writer, but you actually have to pitch yourself as a person with something to say, with experiences, with point of view. And I think that's key to writing a pilot. And that's what he did in this particular pilot. And it just so happened that it was kind of a writing sample of sorts, right? Alexander Payne got it and said, this is the guy I need to help write my movie. So, or turn his thing into my movie, or whatever, however you want to frame it.
If you ever want to hear us talk about pilots, we did the Cobra Kai pilot, right?
That's right.
Yeah, if you want to hear us exclusively talk about a pilot.
We did. And one day we're going to do the Game of Thrones pilot. Because that's the one thing Bob doesn't want to do.
Nobody wants that.
We made Jamie do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Is it really that good? Is it that good of a pilot?
Okay. The Game of Thrones pilot is very instructive because a lot of people want to make shows like that. But I personally, I mean, it's kind of dated at this point. I don't know if maybe for its 10th anniversary.
Nobody wants to listen to that.
Yeah, it's like, we'll have to wait to an anniversary special or something.
So I did want to, there's no really good place on the talking points to bring this up, but I did want to bring up, so where I got this information from, David Hemmingson was on Final Drafts podcast, which is called Right On. Mm-hmm. And it's a great episode for anyone who wants to listen and get some very personal insight about the writing of this. He said he has a series of character writing prompts. And I think when you hear these, they're going to really inform like the characters that we're going to talk about and how he came to those. And this is how he builds his characters. He has 4 questions he asks himself. Number 1, how do they justify what they do and how they behave. Number 2, what do they fear? Number 3, what are they proud of? What makes them feel like they have value, like they're worthwhile people? And number 4, what are they ashamed of and hiding that makes them feel like they don't have value? And he said he can use these 4 prompts to build any character from. And I feel like we are experiencing the answers to those questions in every way, shape, and form throughout this story. So I just wanted to share that for listeners.
Yeah, I almost feel like I could answer that.
Yes, very
about
clearly.
every character, very
Yes,
clearly
yes,
about
yes.
all 3 of these leads.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Do you want? Okay, let's talk about the opening and closing image and arc. Whose is this?
This
This is me.
This is
So
Jamie.
I found the opening and closing to be instructive in this one. So I thought it'd be a good place to bring up an old topic that we've done a million times before. So what I'm going to tag as the opening image of this one. It kind of starts out with a choir and they're singing, and then it's almost very solemn, and I almost say it's like a snow globe in some ways of this small town. It's kind of blue collar town with this fancy pants school like up in the corner, and it's very solemn and nostalgic, and the little town of Bethlehem, and it's almost reverent to it. It's almost like church, right? It's like a church hymn, and it's kind of the opening image. So opening image and final image, when you're writing, they're good things to brainstorm first, because you can say, how does my world start, and then how does it finish? And I'm going to kind of bridge the gap. My story is going to bridge the gap. I always say building bridges. So you put your posts up, and then you earn it. You earn that journey from one end to the other. So the final image in this is Paul Giamatti's character driving out after he's kind of thrown himself on the grenade, so to speak. And he's changed. He's a changed person. But in the beginning, he's kind of the reverent person. He's kind of that nostalgicness is almost like what he believes or what he honors or what he lives by. It's that nostalgia. But in the end, he pulls over on the side of the road and he spits, and then he drives on. So it kind of has this bookend of this reverence, which is his psychology in the beginning, to the point where he's like spits on the ground, hollowed ground, and drives off to live, a full life, as opposed to this kind of contained, institutionalized life that he began with. So anyway, if you come up with your opening and closing, then all you have to do, as if it's easy, is earn it.
How do you earn that?
But at least you know the journey if you have the beginning and the end.
And what's extra interesting is because he threw himself on the grenade because he still believes in the motto of the school. You know what I mean?
Integrity.
Like he has integrity about, because I forget the actual wording of the motto, but it was like about how the schools changes boys into. Do you guys remember it? I don't remember.
Oh man,
good human beings, basically. But he threw himself on the grenade.
Right. Well,
because he knows that would still happen, and the school still has that much integrity, even without him.
Yeah, it's weird though. I think I think he still believes in the motto, but not the school.
Yeah, true.
Like that's almost how I'd pin it, because the school is the same school that would have not stood up for the kid and not stood up for him, and all that stuff. But he still stands by the motto, the ultimate.
I got the motto. Ready?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
One he says this in what I think it's not on the talking points is our version of the go to the classroom scene, which is the headmaster's office, not the classroom. And he says, as Dr. Green used to say, and he gestures at the portrait in the script. Our one true purpose is to produce young men of good character.
Right.
And we cannot sacrifice our integrity on the altar of their entitlement.
Yes.
Which, by the way, he's interrupted by the headmaster who says, I don't care what that guy has to
say. Right.
So there's the motto, yeah.
Nice.
Handy to have the script.
And are you done with that, Jamie? Did you want to talk about the arc more, or
no? That's it. Okay. It's just that simple concept of opening image, closing image, and I thought this one had a decent bookend to talk about.
Yeah,
it does start very delicately, showing us the life on campus and everything. The institutionalized genre.
Yes, yes. So this is the infamous genre conversation, which I need to try to find a way to press a button. So I'll do
Full
my quick.
swing. Here goes
Exactly.
Jamie.
There you go.
The thing that I've probably repeated more than anything else on this podcast, I don't think there is any one thing, but so the genres are something from Save the Cat. So they're not like what I always say blockbuster genres, not horror, comedy, drama. These are more like patterns of storytelling that keep repeating themselves that you can kind of learn something from. Blake Snyder came up with 10 of them. Some of the ones we've talked about on the show many times. Monster in the House, which is horror movies. There's a monster, there's a house, there's a sin that brings about the monster. Um, Golden Fleece, there's a prize, a trophy, there's a road to get to it, there's a hero on the road. Dude with a problem, there's an innocent hero, there's a sudden problem, a life or death battle ensues. So in this one, there's another one that I kind of think there's really two that come to mind. I mean, there's my knee-jerk one that comes to mind, and then there's the other one, and then there could even be a third genre that comes to mind here. So I wanted to talk about all three. So the knee-jerk one that I think is part of this, I have a theory on this that I've talked about before. I do think this one kind of is a buddy love one, right?
Mhm.
An incomplete hero, a counterpart who makes that completion come about or has the qualities the hero needs, and a complication that, so they're either stuck together or they're driven apart or something like that. That's usually the story of a buddy love. And then they both learn from each other. Definitely has those qualities in that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. I have this theory that some of these genres always need to be combined with another genre. Like it's rare that a buddy love story is just about the love or the buddiness. Usually there's something else going on, and that's the B story or something like that. Like I'll give you an example, like Lethal Weapon. Those two were buddies, but really it's about the crime, right? But it's still
Right.
still a buddy love story, but it's also probably I don't know what Lethal Weapon is.
A why done
Yeah.
it probably.
Probably a why
Yeah.
done it or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but still is a buddy love. Okay, so there's one other one that I wanted to bring up in this case, because we don't see this one that often, and that's why this one popped up. Like, oh, maybe we can finally talk about this. Institutionalized. So, institutionalized stories are usually about groups. So a lot of times it's like group think almost. So like it's like the military or prison or something, or some kind of, it's almost like the man is the problem or the institution is the problem, or the institution, maybe it's not the problem, but it's kind of the overall thing that's forcing people to think in a certain way.
You have a dystopian government, maybe even
Absolutely,
like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's usually a family, an organization, or a business that's unique. The story is a choice. It's like there's this ongoing conflict that pits the person against the system, and there's usually like Blake had a couple ideas. Like he called one like a Brando, which was like a rogue. There was one which maybe Angus is sort of,
Yeah.
you know, he had another character called a Naif, and I think that would be kind of like somebody who really didn't get what was going on. They were kind of new and they're fish out of water kind of thing. And then he has a character called a company man, and I think Giamatti's character would be categorized as a company man. And the last but not least thing is, at the end, there has to be a sacrifice has to be made. And it's like it's like you join the system, you burn it down, or you commit suicide. So you fall in the grenade. And like I said, we already have the fall in the grenade moment.
Right.
So I think this one is very much like one to look at for institutionalized. It's one that really is about, you know, the way of thinking of the institution pervades Giamatti's company man character. He goes head to head against a Brando as, you know, this one doesn't have the Naif. Usually there's a Naif or a Brando. It's usually a fish out of water or a rebel. It's one or the other. Cuckoo's Nest is another popular one. That this one gets labeled as. But I do think this one has elements of institutionalized. So I think it's worth looking at for that reason.
And I like the way that you put it, that these things are, you have an idea like this, you're trying to fill the blank page. You studying the genre patterns that your story, your concept fits can help you get, the answers to what's going to be in your movie, and also how to subvert it, right? So
Right. That's right.
yeah.
That's right. Because there's even another one that I could see people falling on, which is rites of passage. And
A splash of that.
yeah,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
for him at least, for the boy at least, as opposed to the
Angus.
man, And usually the rites of passage is there's a life problem, and usually it's like a life problem you can label, like divorce, growing up, something like that. There's probably something between him and his parents, and all that kind of stuff that could be labeled as that. And usually there's a wrong way to attack the mysterious problem. Like, that's the key. And the solution involves acceptance of some hard truth. Like, that's the three things of rites
Which
of
Angus
passage.
absolutely does with his father and
Yeah.
parents and his
So
place in the world.
It's kind of weird because I can see, like, the buddy story is key. The institutionalized story is specifically like a Giamatti kind of story, like if you look at it from that perspective. And then there's a rites of passage story informing that other story. So there's different elements of all three in this one. But overall, I think the institutionalized is the one that really grabs me as like, oh, this can help you understand it.
It's a boarding school movie.
It's a boarding
hard.
school.
It's hard not to see that.
And all three characters are,
stuck. Yeah.
Stuck. As the writer put it when he was describing those characters, their lives are holding over in this institution. Not just Christmas break, their entire lives are stuck.
Some by choice.
Yeah.
Some not by choice. Right. You want to talk about comic obsessions? Something we've talked about a lot on this show.
We have
every comedy episode almost, I think.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about it on
10 things.
10 things, but
like Bridesmaids and Wayne's World and stuff, we've addressed these.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not just in comedies too. We found it in Midsommar.
Oh yeah.
It's oftentimes the comic relief in a drama or horror story also has a comic obsession. So
they're always obsessed with sex or food, right? Sex and food. That's like usually.
So that's funny that you say that, because one of the references is going to be a food thing.
Yeah.
So what is a comic obsession? This came from I went to decades ago. I went to a Robert McKee comedy-centric seminar, and one of the techniques I pulled from was this notion of a comic obsession, which is when a character has a fixation or a behavior they feel is normal, but the other characters in the audience feel is extreme. So to them, this is just like normal, right? And to everybody else, we're like, whoa, this person. And I think that in a horror movie also, you could twist this and call it a creepy obsession, right? You could do the same thing, but tweak it a little and make it a creepy obsession. But in this,
in a love story.
In a love story, yeah, you could.
Yeah,
that's true. A couple of easy to learn from examples. Meg Ryan, Sally, and When Harry Met Sally is her complicated restaurant orders. There's that food thing. Randy and Scream, his encyclopedic horror movie knowledge. Also premise specific comedic obsession. And I think The Holdovers has a great one and a really easy to learn from one, which is Paul's obsession with historical references. This is the engine for what makes him a funny character. Like, every time he pulls that out, it's always funny because everybody in the story is like, who gives a shit, dude?
They don't care at all. They don't even know the reference.
Never.
He's talking to no one but himself, and that's why it's funny.
Yeah, and
he's talking to himself.
My favorite one is my favorite example of how this shows how this can be used for comedy is at the bowling alley bar when he's talking to the downtrodden Santa Claus, and he tells him that his uniform is historically inaccurate and gives this long rambling reference to where the legend of Santa Claus came from and everything. And the Santa Claus just looks at him and blinks like, what the fuck is your problem, man? So anyway, this is that Paul's obsession with giving historical references is a great example of this comic obsession and how to make something that makes your character funny in any situation, basically.
Yeah, it's a great example. Like,
Yeah.
like I feel like we could reference in other episodes where we talk about comic conceptions. You could reference Paul.
Yeah, Paul.
You know what I mean? Like,
you
he's
could
a good
just do
reference.
Paul, yeah.
Yeah, he's a good reference.
Meta.
Meta, right. Do you want to talk about the B story beats?
Yeah.
This
is mine. This is mine.
Okay.
And this goes back to the buddy love thing. So I'm doing this recent webinar, and I've been coming up with some new stuff for it. So this was something new I kind of came up for the B story. I found, so in Save the Cat, one of the 15 beats is the B story, and it comes right after the break into 2, right before the fun and games, and it just kind of sits there. It's called this B story beat, and a lot of people get very confused as to what it is or how to use it or something like that. And I think there's a few things that become difficult with the B story beat. One is the B story is actually a story, so it's more than one beat, even though it's just it sits there in the middle, as this beat you have to fill in. And the way it's kind of evolved over time is that people now say the B story beat is the first beat of the B story. Like that's kind of it. And it usually means a character becomes more important, or a character becomes something about the character. We realize sometimes it's the first time they meet, but it's some kind of thing that happens there, that some character comes into the person's life. So maybe it's when Luke Skywalker talks to Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like, and that might be that. Or maybe it's when
Harry Met Sally.
Daniel LaRusso. That happens a little earlier because of that movie.
Joking.
Maybe it happens with Daniel LaRusso when Mr. Miyagi saves him for the first time. So even though that character is in the movie, it kind of says, oh, this guy knows karate, and he might be able to train me. So it kind of takes the story to the next level. It kicks those two off into what I think is like a situationship. You know what I mean? They're in some kind of thing together. They're stuck together.
Situationship. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a very Xennial term.
Very Xennial
Jamie.
term. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So they're in the situationship. I think so. I came up with some beats to help people flesh out their B story. And I'd like to just kind of read them off, and maybe we can figure out if these beats even apply to the holdovers. Keep in mind that I came up with these beats in order to help you brainstorm a story, not to analyze somebody else's story, because they might not do these beats. They might totally ignore it. But I think most of these, you can kind of see what I'm talking about by looking at the holdovers. So the number one beat I have is the meet cute. But the way I determine meet cute, it's very much kind of like what I just said about the first B story beat. Like, it's the thing that starts the situationship. That's the thing. It's so Giamatti and the kid might have a relationship already, but what's the thing that's locking them together? That's either going to force them to be together, or it's going to push them apart, is the thing. And in this case, it's pushing them together. And,
Christmas, break, right?
Yeah, and I would even analyze it as when everybody else goes away except him, because then now they're one-on-one. Now they're literally there together, one-on-one.
Could you frame it like Paul Giamatti has no one, and now the kid also surprisingly has no one.
Has no one as well, and
they both have no one.
Yes, these two are buddies now. It's not
Jamie,
even.
There's also one for Mary when he goes to the kitchen. And they have their first scene together. That's just the two of them, and he finds out she's gonna be even before that. He finds out she's gonna be there with them for the Christmas break, and she basically offers him a drink. He's looking at her bottle, and she pulls out a cup, and then she says, this is a necessity, right? And they have they share a drink right there when we first meet them.
There's some great, by the way, we didn't go over these, but rooting resume kind of material and stuff in that year, like when the one person's talks about her cooking, and Giamatti gets so mad and you don't understand what that woman has to do. When he gets so angry about that and stuff. There's some great stuff in there.
Yeah, there is. Jamie, move your mic forward.
Where's my mic? Here we go.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, go ahead.
It's weird.
Cue the phone call.
Yeah.
There we go.
The doorbell.
Okay. There we go. So let's see. Where else are we? So anyway, that's the meet cute. Then there's the love and games, which I think is kind of like the fun and games. So now we're in this situationship. There's this complication that's holding them together. And now we're going to do things that kind of milk the tension of that. And these are all the little things that happen of him running around the school and whatever else that has them kind of come head to head, that we're just milking the complication of stuff.
And like Bob said, the dating game, them watching Mary and I feel like Mary and Paul have their own version of this also happening. And they're watching the dating game together. They're doing the I share, you share, you talk about Jamie, where, one dating game scene, she's sharing about her backstory. And then the next dating game scene, she's asking him for the answers to the same question. You ever been married? You ever? And we get these answers that we're curious about. And it's very much like a love story.
Yeah. And I should say that while the first two beats, I think, are in most of these B stories, some of these beats I have skipped them. The B stories skip them. And these B story beats are sprinkled in to the multi-scene beats, like the fun and games, the bad guys close in, and sometimes intersect with the single scene beats. So all that's a little bit much, but I just know that this is almost like the shadow story going on across the main story.
Right.
So the next beat I have, we talked about it last time, the sex at 60 beat around the midpoint, but also the intimate moment / sex at 60. So in a movie that has true romance, maybe there would be a kiss, maybe there would be a love scene right in the middle that kind of took things to the next level. In a movie like this, that's not a romantic relationship. It's usually more like they touch each other in an intellectual way, or by saying something or confessing something deep, or they seeing each other a different way. And I definitely think this movie has those. This movie has
a few of them. It feels like it's a progression of them.
It has a few.
That exact midpoint, though, is definitely their version of this. When when he's chasing him around the school.
That's what I marked.
Yeah.
Right.
The
and
broken
he takes
arm.
a grenade. He jumps on the grenade for him.
He jumps on the grenade.
Angus jumps on the grenade for Paul.
Yeah, he does not want to get him in trouble. And I think that is that kind of moment where it's like
bonding.
Yeah. Maybe this guy is going to be my friend, kind of thing. Or maybe this is deeper than just student kind of.
There's a
teacher
splash of that at the winning ticket bar. Too.
There's
like
more
how
of
they
that,
get out of that situation, and it seems like they become partners instead of tension. They're starting to work together.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, that usually then stirs a deeper relationship. So we're going from this situationship to an actual relationship in some ways. Then the internal bad guys, heartfelt confessions. This beat is usually those feelings are stirred from that intimate moment or whatever. And now real confessions are shared sometimes. And these confessions usually address the need or relate to like the shard of glass, like the shard of glass being the origin story of why they're flawed. Like what's that, kind of like what you said, the deep down shame or whatever that they have that maybe they don't tell anybody about. These are kind of those feelings kind of starting to get stirred up. They're starting to show true sides of themselves during this section. And then this is a beat that I almost always see. I call it the "we almost had it all" beat, where the relationship gets really, really close, and you can feel these two people are getting close. And the interesting thing is, after the intimate moment, what I find in buddy stories, it pretty much is on a positive trajectory. We're usually like, we go from like they don't understand each other too much to, oh, now we're getting closer and closer and closer. And it kind of raises the stakes in some ways. And it reaches a crescendo when they get the almost had it all. Like they're just having fun and they're friends and they're I think the movie theater beat is kind of like that when
Yep.
they're hanging out.
Do you think in this movie it would be like when they're celebrating New Year's Eve or something like that? Like that feels like
that
harmony.
that could be one. I actually think like that point when they're watching that movie together and stuff. To me, that was what I labeled.
Gotcha.
But only because it usually happens right before a beat I call that this movie doesn't really have, and I'm actually surprised it doesn't.
It teases it though.
It teases it.
Almost.
It teases it. Yeah.
But the big breakup, and I think that scene where he sneaks away is the big breakup scene. It's like
it feels like it.
It feels like it.
So you get that much.
The way the movie works, they don't like wallow in it. You know what I mean? It's just like they have the kind of, and then he instantly says about his father, and then it kind of transitions. But the big breakup scene, it's kind of there. I mean, it feels like it. It feels like what a movie would normally have as the big breakup. The big breakup usually comes either at the all is lost or right after the all is lost. Like sometimes what happens in a movie is something horrible happens and then they blame each other and they break up. You know, that happens a lot in movies with B stories. And then last but not least is, and this comes from Blake's materials in some ways, but the race to the airport moment. And in the
liar, right?
Liar, exactly.
He named the romantic comedy.
Right.
And to me, the hero has to make a grand gesture to show how different they are as a person and how worthy the buddy is. So in this case, I think throwing themselves on the grenade and stuff like that is the grand gesture. So these are just some beats to help people flesh out. Like I've had so many people ask me about the B story that I finally broke down and I said, how can I be instructive? So I came up with these, I don't know how many, 7 or 8 beats that I think can help you kind of flesh it out. And then you can kind of sprinkle these where they're appropriate in your story.
And I bet this crosses genres too. Like I bet we could break this down for Quint and Brody.
Oh, absolutely.
And Hooper.
Absolutely.
And you'd find like the big breakup and, you know,
the
sacrifice, the grand gesture. He's getting eaten by the shark.
So I intended this not
grand gesture.
What's the race to the airport? Okay.
Yeah, I intended this not to be for buddy love stories necessarily, even though it maps. I intended this to be for any story's B story. I think that's what it's for. So
that's why I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It should map across genres. And again, maybe some of them, maybe not all of them show up in like a movie where Quint gets killed at the all is lost moment, you know, so you don't get to the big breakup or the race to the airport because you kind of ended it. Though quite honestly, it's probably not Quint. It's probably Brody and Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah.
Hooper.
They're probably they're probably the B story. Yeah. And maybe I don't know, we'd have to go back and do Jaws. Maybe they do have more of the B.
We did Jaws, but I would say both of them aren't as endeared to Quint in that way, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're endeared to each other. But
I wanted to bring it up because I
it's
think
a good
that
example.
this is a great tool for multiple genres, Jamie.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And it really was intended for that because I get so many people that just don't know what to do with the B story. And then they just kind of do one beat and they kind of get confused. And I was like, look, and I almost feel like these are beats that kind of, again, they're like the shadow story. So you could put them in different places. You don't have to think of them as an exact like page 27 or something.
Oh God.
Yeah.
You know what movie kept coming up while you were describing these, Jamie? Is Harry and the Hendersons. I kept, for some reason, every one of these beats, I kept reading Harry and the Hendersons.
Yes, we should do Harry and the Hendersons, man.
Hendersons.
Yeah. Was it Harry and John Lithgow that you were kind of thinking of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a buddy story between the two of them, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I don't know why that's what came up, but that's what came up. I think it was the big breakup. You know?
Yeah.
Come on,
man,
I mean
like,
the big breakup, right? Yeah.
Almost every movie does have the big breakup.
That, right?
Yeah, the big breakup is just something where people start pointing fingers, and you know, it always happens right around the dark night of the soul. Sometimes it is the all is lost beat, but not always.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Touch tones and twitches.
This is mine, and this is something that we haven't only talked about a couple times in 112 episodes. So, this comes from a guy named William Martell. If you're out there and you're listening and you're learning the craft and you haven't read William Martell's Blue Books, check them out. They're really awesome. Jamie and I reference them a lot on this show. And they're filled with little tricks, just like we talk about a lot. And the touchstone in Twitch is one of my favorites. And it is basically, we are introduced to objects that allow us to like visually, they are like a visual representation of a character's like emotional conflict. And every time we see them, and the touchstone side of it is, those are the positive feelings. It's a positive memories. The person is feeling something positive in relation to that object, and the twitch is the negative. And so every time this thing shows up, the character twitches, you know, and the stories use these objects to give us like an emotional barometer every time they show up, to show how the character is growing or changing, or not growing and not changing when they should, you know. And Holdovers has some great examples. One we did talk about, my favorite one, is the Mitchells versus Machines, the wooden moose, Dad's favorite thing. In that movie, the touchstone has its own like evolving storyline where we learn more about it and behind it, and it does multiple, it works on multiple levels. A very easy to learn from one is Top Gun, Goose's dog tags. Maverick wears them around his neck after we see that, you know, that situation that creates his wound is an emotional conflict. And every time he's stressed out and feeling that guilt and shame, he's clutching the dog tags, you know. And then in the before the climax, he throws the dog tags into the ocean, and it signifies to the audience that he has healed, or at least made his peace with this shame and this guilt, and that he's ready to, like, you know, achieve the goal. And sometimes it's a song. In the Black Widow, it's a tape and the actual song American Pie for the family and their whole backstory. But anyway, the Holdovers has a bunch of easy to learn from examples of this and how to do it well, and also shows that you don't really need to use it much and it's still impactful. So the first one is Angus and his old family Christmas card. And we meet him. It's in the first scene when we meet him. He's rooting around for it. He wants to, you can tell like there's something important that he wants to look at, and he pulls it out, and there's emotion on his face, and we want to learn more. Interesting side note, in the script, it is a beach photo. It's not Christmas specific. And in the movie, they changed it to a Christmas card.
Premise,
specific,
right?
Yeah. So I thought that was a very, they like realized before they got to shoot, like, why don't we make it more Christmassy? And so, and Angus also has another one, which is the snow globe. When he's at the Christmas party, you can tell he's feeling emotions about the Christmases he once had. It's very relatable. And then it turns out that he steals that Christmas snow globe and gives it to his dad in the institution. And then that snow globe ends up being sort of the catalyst for Paul sacrificing himself, right? So the snow globe is like an example of a twitch, or a touchstone. Mary has two, which is Curtis's uniform that's hanging, you know, in right in the center of her closet, you know, and the brown box filled with So this is a touchstone. The brown box filled with Curtis's baby mementos that she then gives away, right? She lets go of it, and she gives it to her sister who's pregnant. So that's another example of a touchstone, and that only shows up 3 times. So you don't need much, but every time it's there, we know what Mary's feeling. She doesn't have to say anything, and the audience gets it. And then the third is my favorite one. It is the crystal bottle of cognac in the headmaster's office for Paul, which is, so that first scene, the go to the classroom scene where he's being told he has to stay there, and we learn all this tension about his character and the headmaster. Paul's staring at that cognac because like he can't afford it, and it's like, you know, it's the fancy. And the headmaster says, "Oh yeah, Remy Martin, Louis the VIII, Christmas gift from the Board of Trustees." And Paul says, "Oh, how generous of them." And anyway, in the middle of all of the holdover section where they're, Christmas break, there's a scene that they added that isn't in the script where they give us a middle beat where Paul's just like staring at that cognac like, motherfucker, I could totally just steal this thing.
Right.
And then in the end, how Jamie described that
He spits it
bookend,
out.
that closing image, not only does he steal it and covet it,
He wastes it.
he wastes it, right? It represents his failure and his entrapment and his imprisonment in this institution and his shame and everything. It's like so perfect. He steals that cognac and he spits it out. He's got it. He's just as good as them, So that's it. It's a great example of a twitch, and I thought that we can do an episode about this script without talking about those things.
It's also really interesting too. The movie does not wrestle with his drinking.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't
any sort of
which I'm fine with.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
It doesn't really wrestle with the drinking problem.
It's not a movie about substance abuse.
No, it is not. But
So-
it's just amazing to me. It didn't. I think it'd be a more hacky thing to do. To wrestle with the drinking.
They probably had that conversation, right? And
I think her saying it's a necessity goes a long way.
yeah, at the front of it, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, those are. I think I listed 5 examples of touchstones that this movie and twitches. Yeah.
I had my first Miller High Life a couple weeks ago, and it was the champagne and beers. I actually really liked it. Like my brother-in-law bought Miller High Life, and because I drink Miller Lights, and he's like, "Do you like Miller High Life?" And I'm like, "I've never had one." No, I actually liked it. I thought it was pretty good.
That was your meet cute with Miller High Life.
Yes.
Do you guys want to talk exposition techniques? I think this is you too, Jimmy, right?
This is going to be mainly you and me now.
That's me and you, right?
Yeah. So we're going to do something a little different, and Bob and I are going to read some of these exposition scenes. So I think this movie has, more than anything, the craft that I took away from this movie is how they handle exposition and the slow drip of information. And I got a great quote from listening to David Hemmingson talk about writing this script that is a perfect intro to this. He said, "I wanted to unpack the truth of these characters slowly. You can't just reveal major information to people randomly. I always try to figure out, where is this information going to go? What are the breadcrumbs that lead you there? And when you actually decide to reveal it, what is the most powerful and truest way of saying and showing it to the audience? How is it appropriate to the character in these moments?" That's how you make the emotions land as real as possible. So I thought that was great insight directly from the writer. So I just kind of wanted to talk through 5 different exposition techniques, and some of these are directly from things I've learned from Jamie, and then some of these are things I've never talked about before. So the first one is at the Christmas Mass, and this is what David S. Freeman, this seminar I've talked about a bunch of times, called Beyond Structure. One of his techniques is called a happy occasion slam. And this is not just for exposition. This is for many things. When a character is going through some turmoil, one of the best ways to make us feel emotions about that is to have a happy occasion that reminds the character of that problem, right? In this case, there's a giant portrait, and we'll just get into it.
Read that?
I'll read this.
The
church scene opens on the script page. The church scene opens with this mysterious image, which is a portrait of Curtis Ezra Lamb in uniform with a plaque bearing the dates 1951 to 1970. So that creates a question for us, like, who is this mystery? There's tension. But it's also a happy occasion, right? Like everybody in church is happy. It's Christmas, and
they're gonna leave. They're gonna get to go home.
Everybody's happy, right?
Yeah, there's a buzz in the air.
Yeah, and then we learn about the loss of Mary's son, revealed amidst a festive Christmas Mass. So that happy occasion slam, and Father Joe. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but Father Joe talks about her son. Says, Just this year, Curtis gave his life valiantly in the service of his country, and let us again extend our deepest condolences to one of the most cherished members of the Barton family, his mother Mary. And in the script, it describes her. Mary can barely hide a mix of powerful emotions: grief, anger, resentment behind a stoic face. And so I think that's a great instructive way. It's such a simple, it's a really hard thing to like not be on the nose about, and make it feel digestible. And that doing it in the happy occasion slam way, I think works really well.
Yeah, we know exactly how she feels about her son, how we know how she feels about this institution, and how she feels about this occasion right now. Like
all three. Yeah.
All three just from her look.
They're getting to go home. I'm stuck here and my son is dead. Yep.
And nothing you say is going to make me feel better.
No.
Yeah. Words are not going to heal that.
Yeah. This one I want to read. Bob, you can be Judy and I'll be Angus. So the second technique is called exposition is ammunition. That's when exposition comes in the form of an argument and someone using their side of the argument to kind of deliver a bullet, right? But through that, we learn exposition. And Alex Epstein's Crafty Screenwriting. I don't know if either of you, Jamie, have you read that book?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's
a great book, and he also has a TV writing book, by the way, that's also great. He's a development executive.
I know of a better one.
I do too. But he's got this great simple quote, which is the easiest way to absorb information is when it comes in the form of an argument. And we've talked about that. That is what exposition as ammunition means. Right. So there's a great example of that when Angus is arguing with his mom, like, please don't leave me here on Christmas. And I felt like we should just read the dialogue and show how it does that.
So I'm the mom,
and
I'm on the other
Angus.
end of the phone.
Yeah.
Okay. Stanley has been working so hard, and we never had time for a honeymoon.
You guys have been married since July. You've had all these months.
Something always came up. I know it's a lot to ask, but you know how lonely I've been.
I've been lonely too. And what about Boston? You promised on the way we'd spend time in Boston.
Angus, listen to me. This is our new family, okay? I know you miss your father. I do too. But now there's someone new in my life. It's just this once, darling. We'll be together at spring break and we'll have the whole summer.
Fuck the summer and fuck Stanley. So it's this
quick
argument. You don't even see her. You just hear her. And we learn everything we need to know about Angus, and we get so many answers to his anger and his behavior, and we're like, why is this kid like this? And we learn even more about that insight into that later. But it's 15 pages in, and I feel like, and what is it? Maybe a half a page, and that's like everything you need. So it's a great example of how to use exposition as ammunition to give us insight into the character. Okay, so the third one, we talk about this a lot actually in like horror movies. Like a great example is the Ghostbusters burying exposition with a joke. Ghostbusters talk about like cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria. They talk about the Gozer stuff, and then they always bury it with a joke. Any sort of thing like that, you can then bury it with a joke. And I think this scene in the winning ticket restaurant, where Paul's talking to Lydia about the headmaster, is a great example of that. So, Bob, you can be Paul. I'll be Miss Crane. Okay.
Okay.
So how'd you get stuck holding over? I thought this was Mr. Endicott's year.
I'm being punished. Dr. Woodruff is, how can I put this?
A pompous ass with a dictator complex? Oops, what I meant to say was that he's a lovely, compassionate educator with a really groovy beard.
I've had a lot of former students rise to positions of authority, but he's the only one I've ever had to report to.
He was your student?
My first year teaching, and he was an asshole even then.
So there, we get two jokes.
Right.
We get two jokes. So it's that's like halfway into the movie. And they're just slowly revealing more and more information. And it's really important to the ending that we learn that this headmaster, his boss, he was his teacher. Like, it's just a great easy way to do exposition, bury it with a joke. So the fourth technique that it uses, we have talked about many times, and it is called Pope in the Pool. Jamie, do you want to explain what Pope in the Pool is?
Sure. Pope in the Pool, it's a Blake Snyder thing from the original Save the
Surprise,
Cat.
surprise.
Yeah. I think it's in the same chapter where he explains what Save the Cat means. And Pope in the Pool, apparently there was this old movie where there was this long exposition thing happening. And in the background, the Pope was there and he was getting undressed and getting in the pool. And it was just so weird and distracting. You almost didn't realize what was going on with the exposition because you were so focused on the Pope getting in the pool. So
It's like a Zucker Brothers joke, right? Like,
that's what I think
yeah,
of. I always
yeah.
think of like it's like
airplane or something going on the back of the frame.
But the idea is to give something, almost off-topically interesting within the expositional scene.
Yeah, and you can do this in a variety of ways, and it's a really easy way. The character is focused on one thing that has nothing to do with the conversation itself, so we are simultaneously trying to keep up with what they're focused on and keep up with the massive info dump that is being given to us, and it makes it all easy to absorb, right? And like, it's really hard to do that, to just dump a bunch of information and make it entertaining. So I thought that the liquor store, after Paul runs into his former Harvard classmate, and they lie and they do all that, we've been itching to learn, and they've created all that intrigue in us. We've been itching to learn, like, what the fuck happened? Like, what is this guy's deal? And then he runs into the liquor store because he's just desperate for a good drink. His favorite.
It's a necessity.
Yeah, it's a necessity, right? And so the whole scene, the Pope in the Pool aspect is Paul in the liquor store just trying to find his drink of choice, right? And it does another thing, which is, Jamie, you've labeled this exposition technique need to know basis, and Angus has this desire, just like we do, to know what is the story behind this, right? And Angus's desire creates that tension and that drive to get these answers too. So it's kind of doing
why are you?
Why are you? And also
Yeah.
the Pope in the Pool aspect of, I just want to find the goddamn bottle of Jim Beam. So I thought we'd just like read exactly how the script describes it. So I'll be Angus, you can be Paul, okay?
Okay.
Interior liquor store night. Paul enters and starts scanning the shelves. Angus follows. I thought Barton men don't lie. Don't get me wrong, that was fun, but you just lied through your teeth.
What I say during a private conversation is none of your goddamn business. You're not to judge me.
It wasn't a private conversation. The wife and I were there, and I helped you. Why'd he ask if you landed on your feet?
What is this, Nuremberg?
You're the hard ass constantly telling everybody not to lie and going on and on about the honor code.
There was an incident when I was at Harvard with my roommate.
And?
He accused me of copying from his senior thesis, plagiarizing.
Well, did you?
No, he stole from me. But that blue-blooded prick's family had allies on the faculty. I mean, their last name is on the library. So he accused me in order to sanitize his treachery, and they threw me out.
So you got kicked out of Harvard for cheating?
No, I got kicked out of Harvard for hitting him.
You hit him? Like punched him out?
No, I hit him with my car.
You got kicked out of Harvard for hitting a guy with a car? Paul finally sees his bottle of Jim Beam behind the register and approaches the stone-faced cashier.
By accident, but he broke 3 ribs, which was technically his fault because he shouldn't have been in that road. Pint of Jim Beam.
$2, please. Paul pulls out his wallet and pays the cashier.
Also, he shat himself, which was the greater indignity.
Here you go, killer. So, it's just such great back and forth. I almost broke this down for dialogue techniques, but I figured we just focus on the expositional side. So as you can see, like, they even split up the dialogue a little bit by giving us an update. Like, he found the bottle of Jim Beam, and then a little bit more into the argument, like he takes the bottle to the cashier. Like, that's how you keep the exposition
engaged.
Easy, and keep the exposition easy to it doesn't feel like exposition ever,
This exposition goes so much into what we already had talked about too, about institutions and also the images.
Yeah.
Like he had already
it's,
been.
it's tapping into all those things were
Right.
already, yeah.
Well, he'd already been forsaken by an institution wrongly, sort of.
Before that, yeah.
Before that. And so then he made his allegiance to another institution, and in the end, you get the fact that you kind of don't think he'll ever do that again,
Right?
you know. And this scene, I think, is key to knowing that.
Yeah, and
It's
also
that was the last straw.
And just great segue into this comment that so some insight from the writer, from David Hemmingson. He was talking about this scene, and he said that was Paul's central secret, his main source of shame, that he's been doing this job all these years under false pretenses. He never even graduated from college. So when he yields that shameful secret, this truth sets him free. And it is, like you said, the last straw. It's like the catalyst to his, it's like
Right.
one big push toward the big moment of growth. So, and then there's only one more that I want to talk about, and that is another exposition technique, which is, this is a very easy one too, which is characters hiding secrets. When we see a character like hiding some secret shame, that's a great easy way to make it not feel like over the top, on the nose exposition, right? So in the hotel room, they're both taking Librium. Reveal is this is how it's scripted. So Angus grabs something out of his suitcase but drops it on the way to the bathroom, a bottle of pills. Paul picks it up. Those are my vitamins.
Librium?
Yeah, it's just something I'm supposed to take for low energy.
You mean depression?
Hey, is that rye toast? How'd you know I like rye toast? Angus grabs a slice and disappears into the bathroom. Paul reaches into his suitcase, pulls out a bottle of Librium of his own, and unscrews the cap. So it's just a simple little moment, but it's so well handled, right? There's conflict, there's tension, there's mystery, there's secret shame from both of them, and the audience gets to feel all of that, and none of it feels like it's being thrown in our face. So 5 different exposition techniques that this movie does really well.
A little bit of almost like off-screen of them coming buddies without them knowing it.
Yeah, there's another bonding moment, right?
Bonding for the audience almost.
Yeah. We got a little superior position there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's everything with exposition.
Yeah, that's with the exposition. So
we got one more, and it's rule of threes.
Thanks for reading that with me, Bob. That was fun.
Yeah, that was good. I don't have the juice to do Paul Giamatti, but you know, I never said I did.
So there's 2 of these, but I only tracked one. I'll mention the second one. So another technique that you can learn from Holdovers to show once again how it's using all the tricks to tell this great story and why you're feeling what you're feeling, is the rule of 3. And that is, this comes from comedy, from vaudeville. If you do something 3 times on stage, it's supposed to be funny. When you repeat something more than once, it becomes a pattern, and the audience sort of assigns meaning to that thing that you just saw a second time. So when the third time it's repeated, we have already assigned meaning to it, and that gives you an ability to like subvert it and reverse it and play with our emotions. And it's all about creating tension about something that we're seeing over and over again. So this can come in the form of situations or dialogue or both. I mean, the one that instantly comes to mind for some reason is Captain America and Vision. We don't trade lives, you know, and then, you know, when Vision makes a sacrifice, he says, or you know, saves Captain America, he says to Captain America, we don't trade lives. There's so many examples of this. So the Holdovers does one that's really, really good that I really enjoy, which is a scenario repetition of lying, which is all about the code, the Barton code, right? Barton men don't lie.
Right.
And there's 3 examples of this, which is it's Angus and Paul lying on the fly to protect each other. And this use of repetition shows how a relationship is changing and growing. It's a really easy way to make us feel like, oh my God, things are getting better, or oh my God, things are getting worse. So the first example is in the emergency room, what we talked about. Angus lies about his injury because he doesn't want to get Paul in trouble, and then Paul lies with him, right? He joins him in the lie at the end. Oh, it's okay. And then the second time is Paul lies to his former Harvard classmate at the skating rink about what he's doing with his life.
Right.
He's embarrassed. And then Angus, to save face for him, lies with him. What? Tell him about your book about the cameras, ancient cameras.
Right.
And then the third one is the big falling on the grenade that Jamie has spoken of. Paul lies about why they went to Boston, said it was his idea to keep Angus from getting sent to military school, and he gets fired. I love that the other one was, the first lie was to save his job, and the second one ends up getting him fired. I love that reversal, that tells its own mini story. So it's just a great...
It's a real, the opposite of the truth will set you free.
Exactly. That's funny. But there's another one with Entre Nous, but I didn't track it. But the use of Entre Nous, that catchphrase of Paul, Angus then uses that Entre Nous in reverse in some meaningful moments to show how like he understands and they're bonded, and so that was all.
It works.
Oh man, it's so good.
Yeah,
the craft, I love it.
Yeah, no, and the guy who wrote it, he's done, like you said, he's done so many interviews. Listen to him.
Yeah, they're out there.
They're out there, and he's good. He was on The Movies That Made Me. Now, he doesn't talk much about the Holdovers, but him talking about other movies, really good stuff.
Oh,
he worships Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jamie, if you didn't know that.
Oh,
like,
cool.
That's like one of his favorites of all time.
Cool, because usually when I watch that or listen to that podcast, it's always things I've never heard of. Like,
No, he's like, they talk about Raiders first thing. I think that was like,
it's usually like something that only jumps.
And Get Out. He loves Get Out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
One of the things that really was really surprising, but it's a very familiar story, is that he said he's been working for 27 years, and Jamie said he had 200 television writing credits, and this is his first feature film that he's actually seen go into production,
like actually made.
Yeah, so he sold a couple before this, but this is the first one that actually got made. So after 27 years of writing, professionionally,
that's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes. So anyway, it's just I'm happy for him. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And he's probably, I'm assuming he's going to become a feature writer after this.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I assume, but I don't know how things work. But did you guys have anything else you wanted to add? Anything? Plugs? Anything more about the Holdovers?
Yeah, I don't think I have any.
Your favorite Paul Giamatti movie?
I guess I'll plug. This is not relevant whatsoever, and definitely not of the craft level of the Holdovers. But a movie that I co-wrote and co-produced like 15 years ago is finally coming to Blu-ray. It's called President's Day. It was inspired by an Alexander Payne movie. It is a slasher version of Election, so I guess it's a little relevant. It takes place at a high school election. It's a very cheap $5,000 budget slasher, but hey, enough people are interested that a company, TerrorVision, was kind enough to put it out on Blu-ray. So 15 years later, it's coming out. So check that out at terrorvision.com. There might be a dash in there, Terror-Vision. I'm not sure, but
probably just Google TerrorVision. You'll find it. Yeah.
And in a few weeks, also a movie that I co-wrote, a feature film that I co-wrote and co-produced, What Happens Next Will Scare You, that Bob also helped out on, should be out from the same company on Blu-ray as well. So those things are cool. Yeah.
Jamie, anything?
Not really. Go watch Last Night at Terrace Lanes. It's still out there. And I don't have a Patreon or anything, but I'm always forgetting to pitch my books on Amazon. So if you like this, instead of a Patreon, why don't you go buy a $2.99 book of Jamie Nash? Like, there's probably the one adult one I have is called Nomad. Go find Nomad. Right. It's kind of a sci-fi alien meets the thing sort of horror story. Go check it out for $2.99.
It's a deal.
It's a deal.
Hell yeah.
That's like a cup of coffee. Actually,
Exactly.
It's less expensive than most cups of coffee.
And a Patreon.
Right?
Yeah, it's you can buy 2 coffees for that price. Like 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for like a third of a cup of coffee. Enjoy Nomad. I think that's everything, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Hey, this is Bob Rose, and thank you for listening to Writers Blockbusters. If you'd like to financially support the show, please consider joining my Patreon. I've been producing the podcast for several years completely out of pocket, and I'd like to keep producing it ad-free and no longer at a loss. If you'd like to help, head on over to patreon.com/ Bob Rose Sucks. That's right, Bob Rose Sucks. And if you want the one and only Jimmy George to help polish up that writing project you're kind of struggling with, head on over to scriptbutcher.com. As a listener, you already know he's the best there is, scriptbutcher.com. You can also support the show by simply sharing it or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate both. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.